Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking out the best Houston sports podcast, part of the Bleav network. And check out Bleav in Astros with Mike Stanton and Bleav in Texans with Cecil Shorts, all part of the network. Joining me is my co-host, Stephen Kerr, 65 plus years in sports journalism. Between the two of us later in the show, can the Astros catch the Yankees or Guardians for the 2 seed? And should this be Verlander's last Astros season? Also, we pay tribute to a Rockets legend. But Stephen, your Texans are all alone in first place in the AFC South, and they beat the Colts for the 3rd straight season in Indy.
How about that? Especially when you go back all those years where the monkey on their back was, oh, they can't win in Indy. They can't win in Indy. It's funny. It all goes in clusters, Robert. But yeah, quite a game on Sunday. You didn't know it. I mean, and it usually is with the Colts, right? It seems like Indy gives the Texans fits, even when the Texans win, as you said, 3 times in a row in Indy. It's not easy. I mean, they had to do it last year, toward the end of the game to win the AFC South. So why not just pick up where you left off this year, as long as you get a W, right?
And I'm sure you, like all the Texans fans, were saying 3 years ago when they won in Indy, thank God they won that last game of the season so they wouldn't have to pick Bryce Young, because what a terrible thing it would be to get stuck with CJ Stroud and have lost your chance at Bryce Young.
Well, I really was not quite in that camp, Robert. I mean, I think I was kind of lulled into thinking, well, Bryce Young, Alabama, you want to get a guy that caliber. But I wouldn't say that I had both feet completely in that camp the way a lot of people do. And what a difference a year makes. Look at Bryce Young. Had a difficult season last year. He had some injuries. Didn't look good in the first game this year. So now I think people can safely say, thank God for CJ Stroud, and just forget that they ever said, oh, we don't want this guy.
It's the worst quarterback trade since Deshaun Watson. Well, I don't know.
Yeah. Ask the Cleveland Browns about that.
Yeah, the Deshaun thing, it's very sad if you're a Cleveland Browns fan. Does the running game change the Texans' ceiling, Stephen? We knew Mixon would be an improvement, but I'm not sure anybody thought the O-line, especially Kenyon Green and Scruggs, would look this dominant against the Colts.
Robert, you know that you have a great running game when the opposing defense and everybody in the stadium knows you're going to run the ball, and they still can't stop you. I mean, this guy, maybe I'm exaggerating a little, but when I was watching Mixon, and I watched him with the Bengals, but I wouldn't say to a great extent. But when I was watching him on Sunday, I had visions of Earl Campbell running out there, running over people, through people. It didn't matter how the Colts stacked up the line of scrimmage. 8 men, 7 men, 6 men in the box. Did not matter. Mixon had an answer. And yes, you do have to give the O-line some credit. A lot of credit, actually, because they did pave the way. But man, it definitely, if he can keep it up, this is one game, but if he can keep this up and the O-line can keep, the run blocking like they've been doing, oh, yeah, it absolutely changes the way the Texans running game is, Robert. And look at this. I didn't know this until I saw a stat yesterday. The Texans had the ball nearly 40 minutes and the Colts 20. You can't do that unless you have a great running attack.
Yeah, and also you look at Mixon and the way he was running, and it was never missing a cut, never making the wrong. It felt like he was so decisive in what he was doing and also making all of the right reads. And the other thing is, you said it looked like an Earl Campbell box score. I haven't seen 30 carries, 160 yards. I mean, that's like old school stuff, right?
Well, yeah, and it isn't even just the carries. It's just I guess I'd forgotten how powerful a runner Joe Mixon is. It was just the way he would run. And yeah, you were talking about how he was getting to all the holes. Yeah, the O-line created the holes, but the running back's got to get there. It's almost as if Mixon knew where the holes were going to be before the ball was snapped. And consider this, Robert. Out of those 30 carries, at least 4 of them went for 10 yards or more. So, yeah, those are Campbell-esque stats if I ever saw it.
And he didn't have to rely on like this huge run that sort of makes the average look better, some sort of 50 or 60 yarder.
Yeah, it wasn't a 55, 60-yard run here, sprinkled in. And he got a lot of those in the second half, but he still looked really good in the first half too.
Which Texan surprised you the most? Kenyon Green's in the conversation for me, but my answer is Kalen Bullock, Stephen, the great diving interception and his Pro Football Focus grade, an incredible 82.3, highest of any rookie in week 1. He's likely going to see a lot more playing time, maybe over Eric Murray. He played on 56% of the snaps. Stephen, is he your pick?
Well, he has to be up there. I mean, I would go with Kalen Bullock. I am going to go with Kenyon Green because it is just so good to not only see him out there and, he made it through the first game without getting hurt, but he was effective when he was in there. But yeah, I'd say between those two, Mixon did surprise me, but since I just talked about him a lot, I'm going to go with Kenyon Green as my surprise. But Kalen Bullock, yeah, what a great interception that was too.
The position group most of us worried about was the secondary. What did we learn about them, Stephen? They got beat deep too much last year. It's obviously the biggest red flag on defense, and I missed this in our postgame show. Okudah left the game with an injury, so he's an issue for their depth.
Yeah, and that's just what you don't need, Robert. And I think I even said it last week on our last podcast. The secondary is what worries me, and then giving up the long ball. And they gave up at least 3 that I counted. Jimmy Ward, I think there were a couple of them that he got burned on. And I know he was mismatched with a receiver. He was 6'3". Jimmy Ward is, 5'11". So one of them was a mismatch. But yeah, I'm a little worried about the secondary still. I just feel like, the defense clamped down when they had to, certainly. But too many long plays with the Colts. And you're going to face some really good quarterbacks from here on out. So you can't afford to keep giving that up. And then we'll just have to see about Okudah. But yeah, they worried me before the game, Robert. And my position hasn't changed on them after the game.
CJ Stroud's numbers, not eye-popping against the Colts, but the throw from his knees, the throw across his body to Nico, and that amazing throw to Nico at the end of the game were all eye-popping. And how about this stat, Stephen? On 3rd and 4th down, Stroud was 9 for 9 for 82 yards and 2 touchdowns.
They were taking a play out of the Texas Longhorns playbook with all those 3rd down conversions, Robert. I mean, that's one of the reasons the Longhorns rolled over Michigan like they did is 3rd down conversions, man, they are so big. And look, when you have the running game that the Texans apparently have in Joe Mixon, it takes the pressure off of CJ Stroud, and he doesn't have to throw 350, 400-yard passing games. He doesn't have to do that. He just has to make the good throws when he needs to make them. And boy, he did on several occasions on Sunday.
Not to mention the fact that, we talked about the offensive line and what they've done, but, the offensive line is going to be better in the passing game than we saw this past week. I think there was some miscommunication, some stuff early in the year. The chemistry is going to develop. I feel like that's going to get squared away. And this week they face the Chicago Bears, which leads me to this question, Stephen. Are we scared at all of the Chicago Bears? Caleb Williams, 14 for 29 for 93 yards in his first NFL start. No touchdowns or interceptions. They got the W at home. And Stephen, I can't imagine Caleb looks much better with that crazy Texans crowd in prime time.
Well, maybe not, but I'm scared for the fact that, it's Sunday Night Football, Robert, and anything can happen on prime time. The Bears, yeah, they didn't look great, but they came back from a long way. So the one thing I would say is the Texans, if they jump out to a big lead, they can't relax because these guys did come back and win, despite the numbers you saw from Caleb Williams. He's still finding his feet. But yeah, being on Sunday Night Football, Robert, I'm never comfortable regardless of who the matchup is.
They beat the Titans, and Will Levis sort of handed him a touchdown.
Yeah.
So
we could thank the Bears for that, obviously.
The Bears ran 22 times for 84 yards. Nothing special on the ground. Their rookie first-round pick, Odunze, is going to be out this week. That's one less potential offensive weapon for Caleb. Barring some major breakdowns again on the backside, and we just keep talking about it because that's the one concern in the defense and the secondary. I'm not scared of the Bears, really.
Well, we shouldn't be, Robert. I mean, this is a game the Texans should win. If they were able to come out and beat the Colts on the road like they were, with Anthony Richardson hopefully being healthy, one of the things that I think did help the Texans is Anthony Richardson misfired on a number of occasions on throws that he should have made. Several of them, one of them at least, to a former Longhorn, Adonai Mitchell. Should have connected on several occasions with him, did not. So you kind of have to hope, if they can put the same kind of pressure on Caleb Williams and really throw him off his game and just jump on him early, ruin that confidence. Yeah, this is a game the Texans absolutely should win, being at home and being on primetime.
It's a must win, really, isn't it? I mean, this is one of those games you got to get.
Well, it is just because of the fact that, man, you want to be sitting 2-0. It certainly helped that everybody else lost. The Texans are in the driver's seat. But, this is going to be a tough division, Robert, I think still. So, yeah, if you go 2-0, you've really got a leg up. And, your opponents are certainly going to get tougher in the future than the Bears. So winning this game is huge, just for that very reason.
And I say it's a must win because, the Bears are one of the easier games on the schedule. It's a home game. The crowd's going to be going. I mean, it's just a lot going on there. Let's talk Astros in a second, but quick reminder, look for our live Texans post-game shows right after every game this year. Tom Chavarria is doing a fantastic job helping you break it all down, and more Texans tomorrow because I'm going behind enemy lines with the Bears Insider to preview Sunday's primetime matchup. Keep an eye out for that one. And in case you missed it, I had Rockets analyst Mitty yesterday. He had a shocking win total prediction and also talked about how they can improve this coming season. You can support us by giving us a thumbs up, commenting, and subscribing for free on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. All right, Stephen, before I get to this week's Astros conversation, did you see who retweeted our Kikuchi story from last week's show?
Yeah, I think you mentioned that. Was it on Facebook or on X that I saw that? It was the look who retweeted me tweet. That was awesome.
Yeah.
That whole story is awesome. And it just kept getting better, Robert, with the response to your tweet.
Yeah, I went full Casey Kasem on that Kikuchi story. If anybody missed last week's show, if nothing else, just go look at the video up on Twitter, but you can always go back to that show. And, Lisa Loeb actually quote tweeting, saying, "What a great piece where music meets baseball," unquote. This goes right up there with my John Cryer, Scott Hamilton, Josh Radner, and Sean Lennon liking my tweets. Actually, Stephen, the quote tweet gives Lisa the slight edge because, she quote tweeted.
She's Lisa Loeb, right?
Yeah,
right?
She quote tweeted me.
Yeah, she quote tweeted you. She didn't just retweet. She quote tweeted you. That's a difference. I mean, I retweet a lot of feeds, Robert, but if I'm going to take the time to quote it, that means something. So, yeah, wow, that you talk about raising some eyebrows. That had to make you feel good right there.
Yeah, it sounded like she actually watched the story, which was I was like, yeah, she watched it. Let's get into the Astros and what's going on with them right now. And can the Astros catch the Yankees or Guardians for a top 2 seed? And as we record Tuesday afternoon, there are 4 back in the loss column from the Guardians, 5 from the Yankees with 19 games left. And Stephen, the Yankees have the 16th toughest schedule. The Guardians have the 23rd. The Astros have the 22nd. So it's no real advantage, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's a long shot, Robert. I think the Astros are going to be in a wild card game. Yeah, I still think they win the division, but I just don't see them being in the top 2. They would have to practically win out and pray that one of those 2 teams at least falls apart. I just don't see it. There have been some fits and starts lately. I think they just got far too behind too early, and I'm trying to catch up too late.
Next, the question I got for you, Justin Verlander won't get his vesting option for next season because he cannot reach the innings pitched. So, Stephen, should this be Justin Verlander's last season with the Astros? What do you think?
Oh, I think it will be, Robert. And I thought that even before the struggles that he's having lately. I did not see him coming back beyond this year. And unless, if he did get the vested option, I suppose that would be more of a feather in the cap. But once he got injured, I just felt like, no, he's not going to even reach that quota. So I felt for a long time, I think this will be the last year that you see Justin Verlander in an Astros uniform. But it'd be a shame, Robert, if Justin doesn't get his act together between now and the postseason, because you would want him to pitch in the postseason and do well, especially if this is going to be his last year with the Astros. You want him to end it on a good note, but I definitely don't see him with the Astros beyond this season. And with his struggles lately, I know we talked about this last week, his postseason, especially in the first series, it is in jeopardy, certainly. Has to be.
No question about that. And then if you look at next year's potential starting pitchers, Fromber, Arrighetti, Hunter Brown, Ronel Blanco. That's 4. Maybe Garcia and McCullers. I know, I guess. Let's not count on McCullers. But that gets you up to 6 starters under contract. Then Javier and Urquidy could be midseason additions, but I think we learned our lesson to not hold our breath for that. But if I'm signing an Astros free agent pitcher, it's Kikuchi over Verlander, 100 out of 100, right?
Oh, absolutely. I was going to say, you didn't mention Kikuchi because I think he is going to command quite a big money this year, especially if he keeps pitching the way he's been pitching and does well in the postseason. I don't know, Robert. It'd be tough, I think, to even re-sign Kikuchi. Never mind Verlander. You leave him completely out of the equation. But yeah, if you can get Kikuchi back next year, that would be certainly a great thing. But the Astros are still going to go after pitching. I mean, they've got to, even in the offseason, just with so many question marks going on. And especially if Verlander doesn't come back, which I just don't see it happening.
Kikuchi's 33. You got to assume he's not going to get some stupid 6 or 7 year contract. So then it comes
well,
to,
you never know with all the pitching needs. You just don't know.
Yeah, well, maybe he does. I don't know. Kyle Tucker is back, but he's only DHing. Bregman's in and out at third base. He's also in and out of DH. Between Tucker and Bregman, Steven, I'm wondering if Yordan has to be the DH in the playoffs. You can't. What are we going to do? DH all three guys?
Well, I suppose it's possible. I mean, Bregman is the one that I'm most worried about. Tucker, I think he seems to be rounding into shape fine, and if he doesn't aggravate anything, but Bregman is the one that I'm really keeping my eye on. So, yeah, those question marks, Robert. I mean, you have to wonder, Yordan if he's going to DH all the time, that certainly leaves that he doesn't have to play left field as much, but you have to hope that the rest of the Astros outfield comes together. They've been showing some flashes. Chas McCormick has looked somewhat better since, he got sit down to AAA and then brought back up. Ben Gamel, we haven't talked a lot about him, but he's been kind of under the radar and doing pretty well. But you just have to hope that those guys continue. So that's really the question marks. Bregman and Tucker, what is their position going to be in the field? Are they both going to be able to play the field and allow Yordan to be your DH for most of the postseason?
Somehow I think Mauricio Dubon's going to fit in somewhere because, say Bregman DHs, then I think Dubon's playing third base.
Yeah.
Or
yeah,
maybe if he doesn't DH, maybe they put Dubon in the outfield. Because I don't know what you think. I trust him way more than I trust Jake Myers at this point. And I'm hoping Chas can keep up what he's been doing recently, but I still trust him more than Chas right now.
You're talking about offensively, I take it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. The way Dubon's been hitting, and, he's certainly not a liability in the outfield and, even third base. I mean, I have no problem putting him at third base if Bregman is not going to play. That's the good thing, Robert. You do have options. With a guy like Dubon especially, you have options that could solve several problems, really. And it's just a real bonus that the Astros have him, and you can bounce him around that way.
Anything else that caught your eye with the Astros before we move on?
Well, I'm just hoping, that they really need Tucker to get rounded back into form before the postseason. They got 19 games to do it. I was a little surprised they didn't give him a rehab assignment, but I think what they're doing, they're basically using this time with the big club as a rehab assignment. They didn't put him out in the field. They're just letting him hit, resting him a day or two. So that, I guess that is his rehab assignment, but they really need him to round into form by the playoffs. If he could just be even near the Kyle Tucker he was before he went out, the Astros are really going to need that when the playoffs start.
All right, let's change gears again because we keep losing Houston Rockets icons. In 2024, Gene Peterson and Robert Reed passed away already. Yesterday, we lose Carroll Dawson. He was part of the Rockets franchise for 27 years from 1980 to 1997. He was a Rockets assistant coach during that time and a part of 4 NBA finals, all 4 of the Rockets finals, both championships. And after that, he took over as GM, drafting Yao and trading for T-Mac. We'll get more into his legacy, Steven. But first, let's look back to our conversation with Rudy T biographer Robert Falkoff. He explains how, without Carroll Dawson, there is no Clutch City. I asked Falkoff this question in our Clutch City tribute.
I'm going to take you back to maybe the key moment for the Rockets and for Rudy T. You write about it extensively in Rudy's bio. It changed the course of history. The Rockets brass decide it's time to let go of Coach John Chaney in 1992, and there's a meeting that day between longtime assistants Carroll Dawson and Rudy with GM Steve Patterson. In the book, you take us right into the meeting. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It was a midseason game. The Rockets had lost a big lead to the Timberwolves. The team was kind of slipping and sliding all year. I guess the next morning at 8:30 in the morning, Steve Patterson had gotten a call from the owner at the time, Charlie Thomas. Charlie just said, I want to make a move. We're going to change coaches. They had a meeting. They called in the 2 assistants, Rudy T and Carroll Dawson. Rudy told me this later that, they had some small talk and they talked about the game the previous night. And finally, Steve just said, hey, guys, this is over. Don is out. It was decided that they wanted Rudy to take it, and Rudy was reluctant to take it. He was very content to have had a great playing career and to be an assistant coach and to be a Houston guy. But he talked to Carroll, and basically they just decided, hey, if you don't take this job, Rudy, we may not have a job at all because, they'll go get somebody and then they'll bring in their own assistants. At least this way, we have some continuity. And so from that, kind of a moment of desperation, Rudy Tomjanovich became the head coach of the Houston Rockets. Rudy never campaigned for it, never even wanted it. he just took it because he had to and had a loyalty to the organization. And then, of course, as we see, the rest is history. And a few years later, he's holding up the trophy.
What a moment that was in Rockets history, Stephen.
Man, I remember hearing that story, Robert. It may have been that interview that you had with Robert. I think it was before that. I know I heard that some years ago. It's just a matter of timing. Timing is everything. If Carroll Dawson hadn't been there at that particular time, if Rudy hadn't been there in that particular time and agreed to take the job, who knows if we'd have had those 2 championships? And we'll never know, obviously, otherwise. But, the thing about Carroll Dawson, first of all, it's amazing. He was 86, Robert. I guess I never picture him being that old ever, just because of his personality and just, his work ethic. But, he also was instrumental in bringing the Houston Comets. Remember the former Houston Comets of the WNBA? When that league first started, he had a hand in that too. So he had his hand in a lot of the pies with, the Rockets and, the NBA and Houston. So, gosh, another one lost. It's just amazing.
Yeah, he picked Tina Thompson, Cheryl Swoop, Cynthia Cooper, and that whole squad from a box of video cassette tapes. Stephen,
what are those?
This is really great. Thompson said Dawson didn't even meet or talk to any of them before he picked them in the draft. So his vision that he had lost. Remember, he had lost part of his vision with a lightning strike back in 1989. That's why he was not coaching. He moved over to GM in 97. So that vision wasn't as bad as maybe you would think it would have been.
Well, I was going to say, it obviously didn't affect him on those picks for sure. And, you mentioned, he picked Yao Ming, and he did help develop Hakeem Olajuwon. Let's not forget. Olajuwon was already there, but yeah, Carroll Dawson was very instrumental in Hakeem's development. So just a lot of players that, both on the men's and women's side, that you can credit Carroll Dawson for their success.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because he was known as the big man coach. He worked with Hakeem, Ralph Sampson, those guys in their development. I'm sure other of the Rockets' big guys also. And, he was also a legend at Baylor, where he played and coached. He was a huge part of bringing in Tommy Bowman, the first Black scholarship athlete at Baylor, integrated Baylor athletics. And when Dawson was an assistant at Baylor, this is a great story, Stephen. He stopped at a gas station, started talking to an attendant. The attendant said Bowman was the best player in the state and directed Dawson to the guy's house. CD spent the next hour and a half shelling peas with Bowman's mother, and the rest is history.
Man, it just goes to show that talent is wherever you find it, right? It doesn't matter. You can go anywhere, and you just never know when something like that's going to pop up. That's a great story.
Let's get to the Cougs and Coug football. And they looked way better this past weekend. They lost 16-12 at OU, but a couple of takeaways that I've got with this one, Stephen, that are good. Number one of the Sooner TDs was that questionable call on the muffed punt. We know that could have been the difference in the game, obviously. Number two, Donovan Smith looked way better than week one, 24 of 28 for 260 yards and a TD. Number three, the Cougs defense is legit, especially considering how tough their schedule's been. Stephen, they're 34th in the nation in fewest first downs allowed, 36 in fewest passing yards allowed, and 46th in total defense.
Well, they certainly couldn't have played much worse offensively than they did at UNLV. So you had to figure you go anywhere but up. I figured one of two things would happen, Robert. Either the Cougars would upset the Sooners or come close, or the Sooners would eat their lunch, or it was an evening game. So I guess it'd be their dinner, late night snack, dessert, the whole thing. So what a great win for the Cougs. And, you didn't want to get too down after the week one loss and the way they handled it. It was hard not to, just because it was the same old Cougs. But, you still got to believe that Willie Fritz, he's got some work to do, but that he's going to turn this program around and get it a lot sooner than you probably might think, on the right track. And that certainly started with OU.
Stephen, did you know that they have the 17th toughest schedule in college football this year?
Well, it doesn't surprise me, obviously. I didn't know the rank, but yeah, I know they did have a tough schedule for sure.
And you look at what everybody else has had to deal with. That's why I said, hey, especially considering their tough schedule, what they've done on defense. Because, how many teams have played two potential bowl teams? OU was ranked 15th in the country, and UNLV, they came off a really great season. They're expected to do very well. Everybody else is playing really garbage teams. A lot of the best teams in the division, like consider, Stephen, my Missouri Tigers, they've had Buffalo and Murray State. Well, they're number one in the country in defense, but again, Buffalo and Murray State, and both those were home games.
Well, that's true, but then look what happened to Notre Dame. They stubbed their toe against Northern Iowa. So, I mean, it just goes to show you never know. But, yeah, the fact that the Cougars defense has played well in those 2 weeks, and they went up to Norman, Robert, this was a road game. So they went up to Norman and at least came close to taking care of business. So, sometimes having a tough schedule like that is a good thing. Okay, you may have a lot of losses on the scoreboard, but if you can be competitive against those teams, I think in the long run, it makes you better because you're going to get up for each and every one of those games because you're playing such tough opponents.
And again, I'm going to go back to that muffed punt, and you watch the replay.
Yeah.
And I just didn't see it. I didn't see where it hit his hand. I mean, they can, assume that it hit his hand because, it was close enough where it wasn't to them obvious, but there was no replay that I could see it hit his finger. And I mean, that literally cost him a touch. I mean,
that was a big play. That could have, who knows how the game would have turned out. So that was a pivotal play in the game. And it's a shame because we could be talking about a Cougar upset, but the fact that they came so close after just stinking so much during the UNLV game, it's at least cause for optimism, I think, for the following weeks.
Plus, a little tough news from the Cougars history department. They lost a member of the Houston Cougar football legacy, Allen Aldridge, who played at U of H, at Willowridge, total local product, and who was also the Fort Bend Bush head coach for the last 16 years, passed away at age 52. He played for the Lions, and he won a Super Bowl with the Broncos. And Stephen Aldridge was also on the original 2002 Texans practice squad, or at least he was on a practice squad that year. I don't know if he was the first guy, one of the first guys on it, but he was on it
But on the Texans' first year, I must have missed that particular passing, Robert. I did not see that, but I certainly remember the name. I don't remember him being on the Texans practice squad, I'm afraid to tell you. But yeah, the former U of H player, great high school coach. So, man, we've lost 2 in 1 week here in the Houston area.
I'll let you talk about your Longhorns for a while. I know you're going to want to at least say something about that Michigan game.
Well, I did mention it earlier. When we were talking about when the Texans took advantage of all those third downs. Listen, the Longhorns capitalized on so many of those downs to keep drives alive. Right now they look for real. And now Michigan, they may be on a bit of a down year, but never mind. When you go to the Big House and they seat 107,000 people, Robert, but according to the attendance, they had like 115,000 people in there. And the big thing that I said before that game, you got to jump on them early and shut the crowd up. And that's what Texas did. I mean, they almost had a touchdown on their first drive, got too many penalties there, but they did. And that's what they've done. They've come up with a big win. The next 2 weeks are against winnable teams. So the last thing you want to do is stub their toe. But right now, as far as Texas teams go, Texas is in front. You got to say it. They're in front.
Yeah, the Aggies took care of business, but the Aggies sort of lose a little bit of the, I guess, the power ranking because Notre Dame loses to Northern Illinois. What a crazy game that is.
Well, what a crazy season so far it's been, when you have that happen and then you almost have the Cougars who almost beat Oklahoma. I mean, it just goes to show, just because you're playing some of these smaller teams, Robert, anything can happen on, any given Sunday. Well, it's college football, so it's any given Saturday in this case.
I saw on social media somebody had Rudy Rudiger in a jacket with a Northern Illinois insignia on it, saying that Notre Dame fans are really upset because Rudy entered the portal and he's transferring.
Well, but here's the thing. With the 12-team college football playoff, one loss isn't necessarily going to ruin you. Now, you're going to have to win out to get there. In Notre Dame's case, probably.
Notre Dame's schedule, though, is
but their schedule, I was going to say, their schedule is probably not going to allow for that.
No way.
And, the fact that you're not aligned with any conference means you're not going to have a conference championship. So in Notre Dame's case, it's going to be a lot tougher. But, with most other teams that you are in a conference, you have a conference title to play for, at the very least, you can still sneak in if you take care of business the rest of the way, even if you stubbed your toe the first couple weeks.
Well, that's all I got for this one. Just looking forward to the Texans post-game show on Sunday. Of course, don't forget about our preview with an insider with the Bears. We're going to have that one tomorrow. Might have something else later this week, potentially. But right now, I've got nothing scheduled as of yet. Hope everybody's enjoying all the content that we're giving you, and we're going to talk to you again tomorrow. So make sure you look for that. I know Texans fans are excited about finally getting a Sunday night game for the first time in a while. Stephen, I forgot how many years it's been, but it's got to be at least 5 years, right? Since they've been on Sunday?
Probably 2019, I was going to say, because, when you have all these losing seasons, yeah, you're not going to get very many of those. So the fact that you had a great season last year, what do they have, at least 4 primetime games, I think, on the schedule? So this is the first of several.
Yeah, looking forward to that one for sure. And we'll talk to you again soon.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.